Here.
Yes, I will.
Okay. Okay.
Let me just hit
We'll
okay.
get started
Everybody.
here.
Let's do it. Tracey, here's the book. In case you're not familiar with your own cover, this is really fun to get to talk to you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you guys for picking the book and having me.
This is really, really fun. I was telling you before we went live here with our recording that I picked The Connollys of County Down. It was our very first Twin Cities Live book club pick in the new iteration that it is. And it really kicked us off with a bang. And so I knew that when I saw this book was coming, I had to have you back. And 5 stars, Tracey. We said, like, what do you think? And it was like, so many people loved the book.
Oh.
And it was wonderful. It was a good, feel good, quick read, which we like.
Good. That's so nice to hear. This one is a special place in my heart. So it's really nice to hear.
What does that mean? What's the meaning of this story maybe versus other stories too?
You kind of you love all of your characters and they all still live up here to some degree. But I think that story in particular was just so intimate with the going back and forth between the two characters and just getting into family and what it means to be a parent and a spouse and all of that. It's just so it felt a little bit more kind of intimate and kind of focused on these two people than the other books.
Yeah.
And what's so interesting, if you read the author's note, which I always encourage people to do, is that there are a lot of characters in this book that have real meaning to you. Real people that you know and love are in this book. Do you do that often?
I really don't. This was the first time I did that, and I didn't set out to do it. But it started with the hockey team. And when I knew there was going to be this middle school hockey team, I, of course, thought about our boys and the sports they did and what came with that. And I thought of their friends. So that's where I kind of started. And I use their names. I use their buddies' names that we still know well today. And then the dog, again, I was like, well, I got to go with Star. That's who I know. That's our family dog. So I didn't plan on it, and I haven't really done that before. But as I built this small community, it just made it feel even tighter to me.
What's been the reaction of people who had their names in the book? Like, do they feel, that's got to feel pretty special.
I think so. They get a kick out of it. It makes, young men my son's age are not my target audience, but they're like, ooh, I got to read that now.
How old are your boys?
They're 23 and 21.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, the hockey thing, listen, of course, Minnesota is the state of hockey, and we respect your upstate New York situation, but we also really will lay claim to being the hockey capital here. It's so ingrained in our culture. My husband played hockey. I have a mite, so all of those things. My son is 7 and plays, and I loved the hockey thread throughout the book. I thought that was so sweet. I really could relate, and we didn't even talk about this much with our book club, Kelly, but I could totally relate to the relationships and the feeling that people have playing on these teams and how those values they carry with them, which was totally what was the case with Kyle. So talk about that a little bit and how hockey was sort of a character in the book.
Yeah. And, I really didn't know a lot about hockey. I knew kind of the basics. I'd been to a few Rangers games growing up in New York. But once I picked the location, kind of like Minnesota, parts of Minnesota, it had to be hockey. So I spent a lot of time researching, and I actually have a great writer friend who lives in Minnesota, and he's a hockey nut. And so he was a bit of a coach to me. But our boys didn't play hockey, but I know how important that team element is. And so I just got to know hockey. It would amaze you how many YouTube videos I've watched of middle schoolers playing hockey. So it was a big part of my research, but I knew it would be important, and I wanted to try to get it as right as possible, because I think team is definitely a theme in this story.
Yeah. We talked a lot about community, and I think that's what you're alluding to. in our book club that the community really played a huge role in this book. And that's why I loved it so much. It was one of those where sometimes you read a book and there's too many characters and it's overwhelming. And even though you had several, I just felt drawn to each one. And it showed how community played such a role in grief. And we talked about this too, that even though it happens to one particular person or a couple, the community also carries that grief. And I think that you dove into that beautifully.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, the setting was so important. I took a long time to kind of, and of course you, in fiction, you can fictionalize the setting. But once I landed on Potsdam, and it could have been a town in other parts, you know, that's why people can relate if you've lived in that kind of town. But once I landed on Potsdam and I got to know the history, it just felt like such a perfect setting. And the fact that there were two universities there added a nice element. But yeah, I deliberately looked for kind of a small, isolated town where people have no choice at times but to rely on each other, and you kind of have close-knit ties. So it was really another character in the book. And fortunately, it sounds like at least a lot of people in Potsdam thought I did a good job capturing the spirit of the, you know, you never quite know. But yeah, I've heard from a lot of people who live there and got a kick out of it.
That's the risky part of not just making up a town.
Yes.
That we talked about a lot too, Tracey, was that theme that, you know, you can have a great love, but a great love isn't always enough. And that even when you have that amazing foundation of absolutely adoring the other person, that you never know what life can throw at you. So talk about building Kyle and Casey's relationship in terms of that foundation, but then also showing the cracks in the foundation.
Yeah, you know, this book was interesting in the sense that the way it unfolded to the readers is kind of how it unfolded to me. I really just started out wanting to explore divorce. That's kind of what I settled on. And I knew early on that I was going to have a dual point of view book and a dual timeline book so that we could look at what happened, what brought them together in the first place, and then what happened later. But I did not know what happened to them when I started that first draft. I did not know why they got divorced. And so I started building the story and really getting to know them and giving them a backstory. And then I finally got to the point where it's like, you really needed to figure out what happened here with these two, you know? And I had all the reasons that people you know, cite when they get divorced, and just one by one I couldn't really land on something that felt like them until unfortunately I hit on the idea that they'd just been through a tragedy, and so it really took me in unexpected directions that if someone had told me I was going to write a book about, I would have said I don't think so. But it felt true to these two characters, and so that's how that evolved for me.
Did you decide the name after the book was written then? Because you didn't know what was going to happen to the McCrays, or does that come first? How does that work?
It varies with books, but that one, I went with that title from the beginning. And listen, when you pick a title, you know there's a very good chance it's not going to make the cut, that your editor or someone will say, oh no, we got to change it for this reason or that. So I submitted it with that title and just kind of, but they loved it. They thought it worked really well. But you know, looking back, that was the question in my mind for much of the first draft too. So.
Well, and you asked that literally. I mean, there was a point in the book, I remember,
what happened to us?
Probably 2/3 of the way through, where you say, what happened to us?
Yeah.
What happened to us? And I think that is so relatable. I mean, that's relatable whether you're divorced or whether you're married or whether you're in a long-term relationship. It can be so shocking to go, what happened?
What happened here? Yeah, and I know part of this came out of my parents split when I was in middle school, so there you go. But there were so many times over the years where I was like, what happened there? Like I remember a different story, and then it changed. And so yeah, I think it's a question we all ask ourselves at one point or another, whether we're going through a divorce or whatever it might be.
Yeah. I want to say that You captured middle schoolers beautifully. I have a 7th grader and a freshman. So
Oh,
I have been through it now twice, those pivotal 7th and 8th grade years. And you captured them beautifully. I just had to throw that in there because the slang, the cap, what else was there?
Yeah.
yeah.
It was like, oh my God. You did you have did you panel some middle schoolers on what to say?
It was a little tricky. Honestly, even though my boys are older, I kind of relied on them because the really fresh stuff, I didn't know if people would get. Like some of it lasts, some of it doesn't. So yeah, it was a little tricky, but I actually relied on my boys still, and they had friends with younger siblings, and so I did the best I could with that. But it felt so real because they would come home with these expressions, and I would be like, I'd have to just guess. I didn't want to ask, so I would try to guess.
Yeah. Like, or just contextualize what am I reading? Like when you don't understand a word in a book and you're like, how can I use the
Yes,
context? Oh my gosh.
exactly,
I do want to
exactly.
ask too, Tracey. I mean, we love talking about the specifics of this book, but you as a whole, as a writer, it's always interesting to me to find out at what point did you realize like this is going to be my thing and I'm going to be or a writer, or maybe you always were, I am a writer.
I think it's always been a desire. I love writing. I've always loved writing, but early on, when I was in college, it just didn't seem like feasible. Like, the idea that I could actually write and publish books, it seems so out there. So I went into a different field, into psychology for many years, and I've worked in the mental health field. But when I had a chance to step away from that work, it's really a second career for me. So I've been writing for about 10 or 11 years now, and I just jumped in, treated it like a full-time job. And but I think by then I felt like maybe I had more to say,
Yeah.
and so I went with it. And but yeah, it was definitely a second career. Although I did a lot of writing in the mental health field, it was kind of telling other people's stories rather than my own. So
But that's very telling of your writing because your books are about family. They're
yeah,
about they're about the push and pull and they're emotional. So you're really kind of tapping into your first career when you start writing.
absolutely. Absolutely. We worked with people from all walks of life, families struggling with everything you can imagine, all ages, different parts of the country. And so just working with people on that level, so up close, I know all of that fuels what I write about now, for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
So there's so much of that in Casey too, in terms of what she wanted to do with her life and then of course her own mental health struggles,
yes.
were which was a lot. I mean, I don't know. I also, Tracey was like, how much are we throwing at Casey? How much is Casey going to go through? This is a rough go.
That poor woman.
I know. Again, it wasn't like, how can I make it as difficult as possible? It just can't, you set up their stories and kind of who they are and what shaped them, and it kind of takes on a life of its own. So I didn't set out to be so mean to Casey, but she did go through an awful lot.
Yeah. We
I
were
would,
talking about this in book club. What is the genre of this book? Like what would you call it? I mean, I wouldn't call it a romance. Like what do you call these genres?
Typically people go with contemporary fiction or family drama. That's
Okay.
another one
Somebody
that
said contemporary
people
fiction.
lean on a lot. Yeah. It's
Okay.
hard to, I didn't even know at first, it's kind of a cross, but it's not literary, it's not romance, it's somewhere in the,
Yeah.
so those are the terms people use usually.
okay, the then and now timeline too. I have to ask because I'm not a writer. I would not even know how to begin to write a book. I know how to read them quite well, but I do not know how to. But when you're writing a then and now timeline, are you writing like all of then or like outlining all of then and then kind of splitting it up? Or are you physically going back and forth?
No, the way it ended up is the way I wrote it. I clearly went through drafts and edits, but I guess because I knew I wanted that dual timeline, at certain points in the book, it just felt like, okay, now's the time to, like when they first were reunited after that chapter, I thought, okay, this is a great time to maybe pop in, like, how did they meet in the first place? Or, you know, how did they know each other back in the day? And so there were just certain points that felt like it was time to kind of drop in history that helped explain maybe what was going on in that moment.
I love
But it was there from the beginning. Yeah.
Okay.
I love the little nuggets, and I would be like, wait, who's Charlie?
I know.
And then it would be there. It would be like a little present in my lap. Like,
yeah, it would go
you know.
right there. Our producer Ashley read the book, and she had one question she wanted to know, and I promised I would ask you. She wanted to know, because she's a type A producer. This is how these producers are. She wanted to know about the 2.5-year time difference between him leaving and then them coming back. Was there a specific reason for that 2.5 years, or did that just feel right?
That's so funny. You know, I try to go for like a nice round number, because otherwise it can get a little confusing. But honestly, I was sort of hemmed in by events happening in the book and when they happened. And at first I had him gone 3 years, but I kind of had to move it up because what Casey did after he left happened the first day school started. So it really was a product of those kinds of things. So you try to go for the nice round numbers to make it easy, but unfortunately it didn't work out that way. That's such a great question, but that's the truth, honestly.
That's a very Ashley question. I did not know that. That's really good.
Yes.
Well, we can wrap up here, but you know, I know that this book is new. And it's one of the hot books of 2025. But is there another family we're going to meet in the near future?
I am working on the next one now. It's early days, but yes, I'm figuring it out. So yeah, I can't even tell you exactly what it's about at this point, but I'm getting there.
Oh my
This
God.
is what you get for being good at your job. People just want more of you.
I know.
Oh, Lord, the pressure. Okay, and I have to ask Tracey before we leave, is there anything in the bookshelf behind you that we like have to read? Or, you know, are there any highlights? I love that you're sitting right in front of all of a collection of books.
You know, I love to keep my books. Do have a shelf of like my favorites all time, but there's a lot of them. I guess I would throw out a couple. One is I Know This Much Is True by Wally Lamb.
Best, absolutely
Fantastic.
for me. I think I read that when I was like 20, maybe.
Yeah, me too. A little bit more older, but it had such an impact. It's fantastic.
Okay, I've never read that.
Oh my gosh, it was phenomenal.
Okay.
It's a big one, but I've read it twice, which I don't normally do. It's fantastic. So, and the other one I'd throw out is The Dutch House by Anne Patchett. It's another fantastic.
Love that book.
Yeah.
Love that. I also loved listening to it because Tom narrates it.
I bet. Yeah. I read it, but
I'm gonna, you know what? I'm gonna read I Know This Much Is True again, because I think reading it as a 20-something versus a 40-something is gonna be, I'm interested in my own perspective on how it's changed.
Yeah, that's why I went back, because it had such a profound effect on me. And so when I got into writing, I was like, I got to go back and see what he did there, because it was so good in my mind. You know?
One of the best. Oh,
yeah.
Tracey, this is so fun. Thank you for meeting.
Yeah, thank you guys so much.
Written 2 books. We haven't read We Are the Brennans yet, but that's on our list too. But the 2 that we have read we loved, our book club loved, and it's really has been a treat to get to, I don't know, just start this little community and read together and get to talk.
I love it. It's wonderful.
It's fun.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Happy writing. Yeah. We can't wait for your next one.
Thanks, guys. All right. Bye.
Okay.
Oh, Tracey, if you come to Minnesota to visit your writer friend, just know we would love to have you in our studio. It's an